The Way We Walk by Thomas Kettlehut, Charles Parker, and Mike Moss. Here's our paper in which they analyze the origins of human bipedalism. Today I want to talk to you about how human bipedalism actually arose. There's a couple theories, one from the trees and one from the ground, and I'll move right into there. First, let me talk to you about a couple of the locomotion types that are pretty important for our paper. Quadrupedalism is using all four limbs for locomotion, and we can see this in the form of gorillas using their knuckles and their forelimbs and their hind limbs. Orthograde suspension is monkeys swinging from trees to trees, only using their hands and not actually using their hind limbs for locomotion. And bipedalism is found in us, where we only walk on our two back legs. And we have a very special type of bipedalism, where it's a very stiff type of bipedalism, opposed to some of the orangutans, which have a much more loose gait. So there are actually two theories of where this bipedalism arose from. The first one is where it arose from quadrupedalism and then eventually turned into bipedalism as we moved out onto the plains. And this hypothesis makes perfect sense. We do move out onto the plains, and then we need to catch fast-moving animals and prey. And how do we do that? We become these endurance runners that can run for miles and miles and eventually catch up to these very fast animals on the plains. This was the commonly accepted theory for a long time, yet our paper is actually arguing against this point and arguing for the second theory, which is that bipedalism arose from life in trees. And this would work by bipedalism originating in trees, eventually making its way down onto the land, and then moving out into the plains, and then becoming a very proficient way of walking. So we're going to go into the analysis and what the implications are of this now. Our question was, what was the origin of human bipedalism? Was it a quadrupedal ancestor or a proto-bipedal ancestor? Our paper addressed this question by analyzing the branch radii versus the locomotion that orangutans were using on those specific branch radii. The reason this was being analyzed was because as branches got smaller and smaller, orangutans had to use more efficient movement and locomotion. By looking at the results of this analysis, we can see which type of motion was most efficient and most effective on these smaller radii branches. And in fact, they find that orthograde-assisted bipedalism is the most efficient and effective way to move on these smaller radii branches. And let me just give you a visual of this. Imagine walking out on a very, very thin branch, but using your hands as support on other branches around you. And you can see why this would be so beneficial. You can move out onto the thinnest branches and grab the ripest fruit at the end of the branches while not sacrificing any of the danger or risk that other monkeys or other primates would have to by moving out onto branches that they necessarily wouldn't be as safe on because of their different locomotion. As well as being efficient in the trees, it is also efficient on the ground, where they do have the advantage of walking and not just being confined to trees and branches. This implies that bipedalism actually originated from tree regions or arboreal regions, opposed to the classically accepted view where bipedalism originated from quadrupedal ancestors. And we can see why this is so different. We would also like to bring up another paper, here listed, where instead of analyzing actual orangutan motions on branches, they analyze actual movement energetics. What they find is that human bipedalism is much more efficient than all other types of locomotion that we have addressed, such as the orthograde suspension or the quadrupedalism. And in fact, orangutans use more of a hobbly type of bipedalism, which is much, much less efficient than the stiff bipedalism that humans use. It is in fact about 70% less efficient, which is why bipedalism eventually turned into this stiff-legged bipedalism. And now we can wrap it back up and address the question. Has human bipedalism originated from knuckle-walking quadrupedalism, or did it originate from the trees with orthograde-assisted bipedalism? And we believe that from both the papers that we addressed, that bipedalism actually originated from the trees, where orangutans actually had the advantage because they could move out on smaller branches and had a much more efficient gait. This proficiency in bipedalism eventually led to our ancestors becoming more and more proficient in bipedalism and being able to move out onto the plains. Here, they were able to use their bipedalism to become the endurance runners that we know and love us. And this became an effective way of hunting, thus ensuring our development onto the plains. This presentation was made with GeForce Experience Recording, PowerPoint, and Movie Maker.